It's been good. It's been quite an experience building an agency from the ground up. But we're fortunate to learn from mistakes that have been made by other agencies in the past, and I had the privilege of designing the team the way I wanted it to be designed.
So how did you want it to look and work?
So essentially I wanted to stress three principles. I wanted the team to be independent. I wanted the team to be highly professional and experienced. In other words, to have a high level of investigative skill. And I wanted the team to be transparent. So those are the three cornerstones that we keep in mind when we make decisions with respect to the team.
How big of a team do you guys have?
So right now we have 3 investigators on staff. We have an administrative assistant, and then myself, the civilian director.
So you came over from being a lawyer, being a defense lawyer.
Correct.
How has that shift been for you, seeing this from kind of two sides? Because I can imagine in your role as a defense lawyer, you had heard complaints about police.
Right.
And now you're kind of handling those complaints in some cases.
Right, so it's interesting seeing a file from a different perspective. For the vast majority of my career, I've been a criminal defense lawyer, but I also have experience as a Crown attorney. I articled as a Crown attorney. I've prosecuted cases. So I've already seen files from both perspectives, but with this position now, I have the unique experience of seeing a file from the third perspective, and that being essentially the law enforcement perspective.
Yeah, and how has that been?
It's been great. It's been eye-opening. It's interesting work. I'm proud that I'm able to serve the people of Newfoundland and Labrador and hold the police accountable, and it's been a rewarding experience.
I know that charges have been laid in some cases. Some have made their ways through the courts. Can you give an overview of how many investigations have you done? How many charges have been laid?
Right. So we typically, I don't have the numbers for previous years, but we typically carry 12 to 15 investigations ongoing at any given time. And in our brief history, we have had, I believe, 7 files on which a police officer has been charged criminally.
Okay, so in most of the cases that you've done so far, no charges have been laid?
That's correct.
What do you look for in the data, or do you have enough data yet to get a sense of trends, maybe repeat offenders, racial data? Can you talk me through that?
Yep. So one initiative we are currently working on is the collection of race-based data. And what I'm hoping that will do is enable us to identify and monitor inequalities in the justice system as a result of racism and/or discrimination, and that will inform, our interventions going forward in order to, to improve the equity and the quality of justice in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Have you seen any trends emerge so far with the cases that you have looked at?
We haven't collected enough data so far to identify any trends. And again, it's not a simple exercise to determine how you're going to collect the data. So it's a more complicated and lengthier process than you might think. And it involves collaboration, of course, with communities who are involved. And again, we've reached out to several communities, Indigenous communities and organizations, in terms of collaborating on how do we collect this data, what should be included, when should we collect it, what form should it be collected in, how should we maintain the data. So there are a lot of questions, issues, and policies that need to be resolved, but we're including everyone. I've always believed in a collaborative approach myself, and the more information I can get about others' perspectives, those who are involved, the better. The better informed my decisions are. So we're currently going through that process, but again, to answer your question, it's too early to identify any patterns at this time.
Why is it so important to have this sort of data to see who is making these complaints?
So again, it's important because it helps us identify any particular patterns or any particular inequalities that may exist in the justice system. Our team is about holding police accountable, And if there are particular patterns that exist within police agencies involving criminal behavior, we need to know that so we can better serve the people and better deal with these cases.
We're in such a strange time right now for policing, not just here in this province, but right across North America. And you have a unique opportunity to kind of see things on the back end. Did taking on this job in any way shock you when you looked at police officer behavior and the complaints that were coming in? Or were you not naive to that because you have worked in the justice system for so long?
Right, so, I'd like to think that part of the reason I was appointed was the amount of experience I had in the criminal justice system from a lawyer's perspective. And so I've spent, as you mentioned, I've spent most of my career representing individuals against the power of the state in court day after day, oftentimes criticizing police officers, pointing out issues with policing in Newfoundland and Labrador. So I was well educated in the way the justice system worked, and so I can't say that I've been particularly surprised or shocked by anything I've seen since taking on this role.
I noticed that when you do put out a decision, it's quite thorough. Was that a conscious effort to make sure all of that information was public, and why do it that way?
Right, so going back to the three cornerstones I mentioned, one being transparency, so this fits under the transparency piece. And I'm a firm believer that the public can't understand something if they're not aware of how it works and what's going on. So the idea is not to convince everybody to agree with all of my decisions, but I believe that people want to know what's going on. It's important to them. I don't want people to feel like, we don't know what CERT is doing. So it was very much a conscious effort for me to ensure, when I put out a decision, that the details are there that will enable somebody who takes the time to read the report to at least understand why I made the decision. And I also make a conscious effort to write the decisions in a way that a member of the public with no legal experience can understand.
And you do that for cases where there are no charges laid as well as when there are charges? Right?
Actually, when a charge is laid, that means the matter will proceed to court. So the details of the incident come out in a public setting through the court process.
Right.
And I don't want to influence that court process with my opinions and my reports. So that's why I don't release a report when a charge is laid. Now, we do issue a news release stating we've laid charges, here are the charges, this is the officer's name, this is when the incident is alleged to have occurred. So the public gets the information it needs. As you indicated, when there's no charges laid, that's when I release a detailed report. And the reports basically give an overview of the incident, the complaint. Here's the evidence that we gathered, the people we spoke to, and here are the legal principles I've applied, and here's the reason why I've made the decision I've made. I also do that in a way that protects the privacy of those involved, because that's something we have to keep in mind in anything we do publicly. So I don't include names in my reports, including names of affected persons, witnesses, police officers involved.
There has been criticism before on whether or not CERT is fully independent from the police. Right. You have been asked this question, answered before. What is your stance on that?
So it's a difficult balance between independence and investigative skill, which are two of our cornerstones. Because normally the people with the most investigative skill tend to be police officers or former police officers, those with not only investigative experience but with criminal investigative experience, which is a separate animal on its own. We have the responsibility of investigating very complex files. So we're normally not talking about a theft from Walmart or something along those lines. We're talking about homicides, we're talking about large-scale drug operations, we're talking about very serious sexual assaults and other sexual offenses. If you're the victim of a serious incident like this, first and foremost, you want the investigators on that file to know exactly what they're doing and to be able to handle that situation. We have to be able to conduct a thorough and effective investigation on every file we have. So this skill comes not only from training, but it also comes from experience. When I was a lawyer, fresh out of law school, nobody was going to give me a first-degree murder jury trial. The same thing goes for this type of work. We can train people and we can hire people, but they won't have, most of the time they will not have the experience needed to investigate these types of cases. We don't get to pick when an incident happens. When something serious happens, we've got to be ready. And I always use the example of when we became operational in June 2021, weeks after we had a fatal officer-involved shooting in Grand Falls, Windsor. Our team had just been formed, and we had to respond at 4 o'clock in the morning to Grand Falls to investigate this very, very serious incident that involved a fatality. I'm very thankful that at that time I had a team of very experienced investigators, and we were able to take that on. And we conducted a very effective, I believe, in my view, a very effective investigation. So thankfully, we were skilled and had the experience to do that. So with a small team, everybody on the team needs to be highly skilled and very experienced. Now, what I will say is, while making this decision to have experienced investigators on the team, I have put in place certain processes to preserve our independence. And I'll go through several of those. So, for example, if we have an investigator seconded from the RCMP, that investigator cannot be the primary investigator on an incident involving the RCMP. Same thing goes for our RNC seconded officer. So they can only be primary investigators on files involving the other agency in the province. So they're not investigating one of their former colleagues. Secondly, as the civilian investigator, somebody who has never been a police officer, I choose the staff on my team, and I ensure that I'm comfortable that who I'm hiring is objective, fair, and willing to hold police accountable. And I am more than confident in the people on my team that they are capable of doing that. And finally, as the civilian director, I'm involved in every investigation. I take a hands-on approach. I monitor interviews as they're going on. I make every major decision on every investigation we have, including the most important decision, and that being, at the end, whether charges are laid or not laid. And I certainly, I think our record establishes that we are more than willing to hold police officers accountable. As we talked about, in our brief history, we've already laid charges against seven police officers, very serious charges against seven police officers in the province, which I would, in my view, is a high number. So again, I think the proof is in the pudding. I think our record speaks for itself at this point.
So now that you're going ahead, you kind of, I'm sure, have worked out a lot of the kinks of what it's like starting the office, kind of getting going, even though it sounds like you were kind of thrown right into it with that incident in Grand Falls, Windsor. What else are you looking to put in place, or initiatives that you're hoping to do in addition to gathering that race-based data that you spoke about?
So I always try to keep in mind we are representing the people of the province, and we serve the people of the province, of every part of the province. So again, I've always taken the approach of collaboration. I get out in the community as much as I can. I've spoken about CERT a lot in the community. I do that to educate people and make people aware of CERT-NL and who we are, what we do. But I also do it to gain perspectives from different groups. One of the initiatives we're working on, we spoke about the collection of race-based data. Another initiative we're currently working on is the implementation of a community liaison. So a community liaison is an individual a different individual from a particular community. So if we have an incident involving a particular community, we would engage a person from that community to work with us in our investigation, to monitor and observe our investigation, who we can then communicate our processes and results to, and then that person can, communicate that information back to their own community in a way that the community can understand. So it bridges any gap that might appear between our team and the community. It creates understanding, it creates communication. So we're currently working on that initiative, and we're pretty far down the road in terms of collaborating with different organizations, again getting different perspectives to help us put that policy in place.
Are you talking about Indigenous communities here specifically?
Yes.
Trying
Yeah.
to be able to properly communicate the process and what's going on and
Right.
that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So you're in the process of doing that now?
Yeah, and now I'll also say we've also met with the Women's Center here in St. John's, and we're considering the possibly using the community liaison in a sexual offense setting, but that's in early discussions. But I'm gathering the Women's Center perspective on that to see if they think it's possible. I guess the theme here is that I'm open to any ideas that can improve our team and build relationships with different members and groups in our community.
This is my final question. How important do you think your team in this role is in this climate that we're in today with, we do have a waning trust in police, not just in this province, but right across North America. Why is this such a critical part of the puzzle?
Policing is about community. And people in the community, for policing to be successful, people in the community have to have confidence and trust in policing. People cannot have confidence and trust in policing unless they feel that police officers are held accountable for their actions. That's what we're here to do. I believe firmly that that's what we have done, what we are doing, and we're constantly improving. We're going to get better over time. We're building relationships with the community. We're hoping to establish trust in our own agency. Again, that takes time. You have to earn trust. You don't get it automatically. We're relatively a new agency, but I'm committed to working at this and building trust over a period of time and get to the point where people feel that police are being held accountable in Newfoundland and Labrador. That's very important. It's paramount.